Hey guys, tonight we begin a terrible disaster known as being a teenager in ancient Greece. A time where everyone has an opinion, arguments are basically a daily sport, and your entire outfit is just a sheet held together by confidence. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always interesting to see who's here from around the world. You wake up, not because you're ready, because the world refuses to be quiet. There is no gentle start here, no peaceful morning. You're thrown into the day like a soldier who didn't even get to finish complaining. In a poor family, your day begins with noise. People shouting outside like they're getting paid for it. Footsteps, something breaking, someone immediately blaming someone else. And of course, rats. Not one or two. No, enough rats to make it feel like you're just visiting their city. They run across the floor like they own the place, which, honestly, they might. Then your mother calls your name. Once, you ignore it. Of course you do. She calls again. Now it's less of a call and more of a warning. You still don't move. A bold strategy. Then comes the third one. Calm, controlled, dangerous. You open your eyes immediately because you're not stupid. Light hits your face as something gets opened. Window, door, doesn't matter. It's aggressive either way. Get up. Not angry, not kind, just tired. The kind of tired that says she's been awake longer than you and doesn't have the energy to deal with you today. You sit up. She's already watching you. Not in a warm way, more like she's expecting you to do something wrong. Your father is awake too. Of course he is. He doesn't say anything. He just looks at you. That look does all the talking. You grab your sheet and fix it. Badly. It hangs off you like it gave up halfway through its job. No pockets, no support, no reason. You sit down to eat. Bread. Just bread. Even that is not guaranteed every day, so you eat it quietly like it might disappear if you complain. Your mother keeps moving, working, fixing things, already tired of everything. She's thinking, I've done more in this morning than you will all day. You're thinking, that piece of bread was not enough. It doesn't matter. Meanwhile, in a wealthy family, you wake up to the same noise because money doesn't stop people from shouting at sunrise. But now there's also someone in your room, a servant, standing there, watching you sleep. They've been there long enough to hear you snore. Loudly. And in their head, they're thinking, this guy sleeps like a pig. But their face says, good morning, because they'd like to have their head on their neck. You open your eyes and see them immediately. Still there, still smiling. You're thinking, why are you in my room this early? They're thinking, why are you still asleep? Awkward for both of you. You sit up, your servant steps forward and starts adjusting everything. Too close, way too close. They're careful, extremely careful, because one wrong move and suddenly their life becomes very difficult. They're thinking, please don't complain today. You're thinking, just finish. Breakfast. In the wealthy family, it's prepared. Bread, of course, but also figs, olives, maybe some cheese, and watered wine, because apparently even mornings need wine here. Everything placed perfectly. Your father is already there. Silent. Of course, he doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence is enough. You sit, you eat, you look at him and smile. It's not real, but it works, because here he decides everything. Your mother is there too. She smiles at you, soft, real. For a second, it feels normal. Then your father shifts slightly, and that feeling disappears. If you are poor, you step outside and immediately get pulled into chaos. Mud everywhere. Not clean mud either. The kind that makes you question your entire existence. Puddles that definitely shouldn't be puddles. Someone yelling that their food is fresh. Someone else yelling that it's not. Someone else joining just to argue. Two men already fighting like it's a scheduled event. Someone bumps into you, doesn't apologize, keeps walking like you don't exist. Meanwhile, in the wealthy family, you step outside and people move, not out of respect, more like awareness. They lower their voices, wait for you to pass, then go right back to shouting the second you're gone, because nothing here actually changes. And somehow, this isn't chaos, this is just morning. Morning doesn't slowly turn into the rest of the day. It just pushes you forward, like someone decided you've already had enough time to think and now it's time to be useful, whether you are or not. There isn't really a moment where you stop being a child here. No one sits you down and explains anything. One day you're smaller, slower, ignored, and the next you're expected to keep up with people who have been doing this their entire lives. No warning, no preparation, just expectation. In a poor family, you don't sit and learn, you work. By the time you reach the workshop again, the heat is already there, sitting in the air like it owns the place. The forge burns constantly, and the sound of metal being struck doesn't stop long enough for you to even notice silence. It's sharp, repetitive, almost rhythmic, except there's nothing relaxing about it. Your father doesn't explain anything. He doesn't need to. He hands you the hammer again, the same way he did before, and just looks at you briefly, like the instructions should already be inside your head. You know what that look means by now. It means, don't make me repeat this. So you start. At first, your arms still feel like they belong to you. You lift the hammer, bring it down, try to match the pace of the others. You don't, obviously. You're slower, weaker, slightly off every time. You can feel it even before anyone says anything, and someone does. Not loudly, just enough for you to hear it. Something like, he'll learn, or he won't. You don't look up. You don't need to. You know exactly who said it, and more importantly, you know they're not entirely wrong. After a while, your hands stop feeling precise. The movements get heavier, less controlled, you adjust your grip, and that's when you feel it properly. The skin on your palm already starting to break. Of course it is. Why wouldn't it? You keep going anyway. Because stopping here doesn't make you look tired, it makes you look useless. Around you, the others talk while they work. Complaints, small jokes, quiet insults that don't sound like insults unless you're the one they're about. No one is openly cruel. They don't need to be. The way they ignore you when you mess up does enough. Your father doesn't correct you every time. That would mean he expects you to get it right. Instead, he lets you struggle just long enough, then steps in for a second, adjusts your hand slightly, changes the angle, and suddenly it works better. Not good, just less wrong. He steps away again immediately, like that was more than enough help. You understand the message. That was your chance. Don't waste the next one. Meanwhile, in a wealthy family, your day is quieter but not easier. The room you sit in doesn't smell like smoke or metal. The air moves, the space is clean, and for a moment it almost feels comfortable until you remember why you're there. You're not here to relax, you're here to be shaped. The teacher speaks and you repeat. That's most of it. Read, repeat, correct, repeat again. It sounds simple when you think about it like that. It isn't. Because it's not really about getting it right, it's about not getting it wrong. There are other boys in the room, all doing the same thing, all pretending not to pay attention to each other while clearly listening to every mistake. One of them answers before you. He says it confidently, too confidently, and of course, he's wrong. The teacher corrects him without raising his voice, which somehow makes it worse. The boy nods like he understands, but you can see it, that small shift in his expression. Embarrassment, quickly hidden. Another boy glances at him just for a second, not openly mocking, but not sympathetic either. You notice it. You also notice that no one wants to be next. So when your turn comes, you're careful. You think before you speak, maybe a little too long, and for a moment you wonder if that hesitation is worse than just being wrong. The teacher notices it, of course. He notices everything. You answer anyway. Not perfect, but not wrong enough to matter. He nods and moves on, which is the closest thing to success you're going to get. You sit there, pretending this doesn't affect you, while very clearly being affected by it. Because here, you're not being tested for knowledge. You're being tested for what you might become. And everyone in the room knows it. Now, if you are poor, at some point, you stop thinking about how tired you are. Not because you're not tired, because it's not useful to think about it. Your arms move on their own now, the hammer rising and falling in a rhythm that feels less like control and more like repetition. You miss once, just slightly, and the sound changes enough for your father to notice immediately. You fix it before he says anything. You don't want that look again. Not because it's loud or aggressive, but because it isn't. It's quiet, and somehow that makes it worse. Around you, the work doesn't slow down. It never does. Someone drops something heavy again, someone else complains, and within seconds, it's like it never happened. Everything here resets instantly. Mistakes don't pause the day, they just become part of it. Meanwhile, in the wealthy family, you're asked to stand. Not because you're done, but because now you have to show it. Speaking in front of the others is different. Sitting, you can hide behind repetition. Standing, there's nothing to hide behind. You start speaking, and for a moment, your voice feels stable, controlled. You follow what you've been taught, you structure the words the way they expect, and it works. Not impressively, but enough. The teacher listens, expression unchanged, and when you finish, he gives a small nod. That nod matters more than it should. Across the room, one of the other boys looks at you again, this time longer. You can't tell if it's respect or calculation. Maybe both, because here, no one is just learning. They're measuring each other, constantly. By the time the sun settles directly above the city, everything feels heavier. The light is harsher, the air thicker, and even the noise changes its tone. People are still arguing, of course, but now it sounds slower, stretched out, like they're too tired to stop but too stubborn to admit it. Somewhere in the distance, a man is still insisting he's right about something no one asked him about, and at this point, you start to respect the commitment more than the argument. There's no official moment where work stops. No signal, no authority stepping in to declare a break. Things simply begin to slow, not out of kindness, but because bodies have limits, and even here, limits eventually win. The workshop loosens its grip on you just enough to let you breathe. Your father steps away from the forge and sits, wiping his hands on a cloth that has clearly lived a difficult life. He doesn't look at you, doesn't say anything, but you already understand. This is your break. Not given, not offered, just allowed. You sit as well, and the moment you stop moving, your body immediately takes the opportunity to complain about everything. Your arms feel heavier than they did while working. Your hands throb in a way that suggests they are no longer interested in cooperating. And your back decides now is the perfect time to remind you that it has been carrying you all day without being consulted. You reach for your food. Bread? Of course it's bread. At this point, if it were anything else, it would feel suspicious. It's hard enough that chewing becomes part of the effort and you break it slowly, not out of patience, but because finishing it too quickly would be a mistake you can't correct. There is no second portion waiting for you. Hunger is not something this meal solves. It's something it briefly interrupts. Across from you, a man pulls out an onion and bites into it like he's demonstrating a skill. No hesitation, no reaction, just complete confidence in a decision that would ruin most people's day. Another worker has olives and eats them slowly, fully aware that others are watching. There is a certain quiet pride in having slightly more than the person next to you, and here, even a few olives are enough to establish status. You take a sip of watered wine and immediately understand why it's watered. If it had any real strength, this place would turn into a completely different kind of problem, and no one here has time for that. Around you, conversations drift in and out. Complaints about the heat, about the work, about people who aren't present and therefore safe to criticize. Someone makes a comment about another worker's pace, not directly, just enough for it to land. No one defends him. This is not a place where people protect each other. This is a place where people survive next to each other. You eat slowly, fully aware that it isn't enough, and somehow that makes you eat even slower, as if stretching the moment will stretch the meal. It doesn't, but the attempt feels necessary. For a brief moment, you consider staying seated longer, just to hold on to something that resembles rest. Then someone stands. That's it. No announcement, no discussion. The break ends the same way it began, quietly, without asking for your opinion. You get up, already tired again, which feels impressive considering you never actually recovered. Meanwhile, in the classroom, midday, for you, is structured. Not comfortable, not free, but controlled in a way that makes it look effortless from a distance. You're brought into a shaded space where the air moves, and that alone feels like a luxury. The food is already arranged, placed with care, which immediately tells you this isn't just about eating. It's about being seen eating correctly. Bread, softer than what you'd find outside. Figs, olives, cheese, and a portion of fish that quietly reminds you that life here follows a different set of rules. You sit, and before you can reach for anything, a servant pours your wine with precision. No spills, no hesitation, no mistakes. It's impressive and also slightly stressful because it means mistakes are not expected here. You begin to eat, controlled and measured, because even something as simple as eating has a correct version and an incorrect version, and no one explains which is which. You're expected to know. As you eat, the atmosphere shifts. No announcement, no formal greeting, just a subtle adjustment in how people carry themselves. It's Socrates. He doesn't look important in the way you would expect. No expensive clothing, no visible display of status. If anything, he looks like someone who walked in uninvited and stayed because no one could figure out how to remove him. People in Athens don't agree on him. Some admire him, others avoid him, and many find him exhausting because speaking to him rarely leaves you with the same confidence you started with. He asks questions that seem simple until you try to answer them, and then suddenly you're not sure you understand anything at all. Your teacher greets him carefully, which is already a sign that this is not a normal interaction. Socrates looks around the room, taking everything in, then his attention settles on you. Not dramatically, just directly, which is enough. He asks you a question, simple, which immediately makes it dangerous. You answer, carefully choosing your words, trying to sound like you belong here instead of someone who is clearly still figuring it out. For a moment, it works. Your voice is steady, your thoughts feel organized, and you almost believe you've done well. Then he asks another question. Not about what you said, about what you meant. And just like that, everything becomes less certain. You hesitate, and you can feel the room without looking at it. The other boys are listening, your teacher is silent, and no one is stepping in to help you. This is yours to handle. You answer again, more cautiously now, adjusting as you go, trying to stay ahead of the next question you know is coming. He nods slightly. Not impressed, not disappointed, just aware. Then he turns away, already continuing his conversation with your teacher, as if you were a small part of a much larger idea he's working through. You're left sitting there, holding your food, realizing that you didn't say anything wrong, but you also didn't say anything strong enough to hold its ground. The figs still taste good. The bread is still soft, but none of that feels important anymore. Because now you understand something uncomfortable. This isn't a break. It's practice. And right now, you're not very good at it. The brake ends, and for a brief moment, you expect something to feel different. It doesn't. The sun hasn't moved enough to help you, the air is still heavy, and whatever energy you thought you recovered disappears within a few steps. It becomes clear very quickly that the brake wasn't meant to restore you. It was just enough to keep you going. You're back at the forge. The fire hasn't calmed down. If anything, it looks stronger, like it spent the brake preparing for you. The metal glows again, waiting, and the hammer is exactly where you left it, which feels intentional, as if it's been watching you the entire time. You pick it up, your hands protest immediately. The blister you tried not to think about earlier now has a very clear opinion about everything you're doing. You adjust your grip, tell yourself it's manageable, and start again. The first few strikes feel wrong. Not completely wrong, just enough to remind you that whatever rhythm you had before is gone. You try to recover it quickly because hesitation here is noticed faster than mistakes. And of course, someone notices. Not your father this time, someone else. A voice from behind you, casual, almost bored. "Careful, or you'll be doing that twice." You don't turn around. You don't respond. You just hit harder, faster, trying to prove something you can't quite define. It works. For a few moments, everything lines up. The timing, the force, the sound. The strike lands clean, sharp, exactly how it should, and for a second, there's a strange satisfaction in it, like you've finally caught up to something that's been ahead of you all day. Then you rush the next one. The hammer slips. Not dramatically, not enough to cause real damage, but enough to make a dull, ugly sound that cuts through the room in the worst way possible. The conversations don't stop, but they shift, just slightly. Enough. Your father looks up. There it is again. That look. Not anger, not shouting, just quiet disappointment mixed with expectation, which somehow feels worse than either of those things. He steps closer, takes the hammer from your hand for a second, corrects the angle, adjusts your grip, and hands it back without a word. You nod, like you understand, even though part of you is thinking that 5 seconds ago you did understand. You start again, slower this time, which creates a new problem. Now you're behind. The others move faster, more confidently, like their bodies stopped asking for permission years ago. You try to match them, but it's like chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. Your arms feel heavier with every movement. Your hands sting. Your back has stopped complaining and moved on to something quieter, more persistent. You keep going, because stopping here doesn't make you tired. It makes you replaceable. And then, without warning, the world shifts again. Not the heat, not the noise, something else. A voice, clearer, calmer, annoyingly steady. Socrates is still there. Of course he is. He doesn't seem like someone who arrives briefly and leaves politely. He feels like someone who stays until things become uncomfortable and then stays a little longer. You're not eating anymore. You're listening, or trying not to look like you are. He's asking questions again. Not loudly, not aggressively, just persistently. The kind of questions that sound simple enough that answering them should be easy, and yet no one answers immediately. Which tells you everything. One of the other boys speaks. Confident. Too confident, I would say. Socrates listens, then asks one question. Just one. The boy stops mid-sentence. Silence. Short. Sharp. You look down because looking at him now would feel like watching someone fall and not helping, and there's something uncomfortable about that. At the same time, part of you is thinking, that's going to be me next. And it is. Your name is said. Calmly, like it's not a problem. Which makes it a problem. You look up. He's already watching you. You answer. Carefully. You build your sentence like you've been taught, placing each part where it belongs, trying to sound certain, controlled, like you've understood everything up to this point. It works. For a moment. Then he tilts his head slightly, not confused, interested, and asks another question. Not about what you said, about why you said it. That's different. You pause, just long enough to feel it. The attention, the quiet, the awareness that everyone else is now listening more carefully than before. You try to answer again. You adjust, rephrase, tighten your argument. He lets you speak, which is not helpful. Because now you're hearing yourself more clearly than before, and the more you hear it, the less solid it sounds. You finish anyway. You have to. There's a brief silence. Then he nods. Not impressed, not disappointed, just done. And somehow that feels worse than being corrected. He turns away, already speaking to your teacher again, continuing a conversation that seems far more important than whatever just happened to you. You sit there, staring at nothing in particular, replaying what you just said, trying to figure out exactly where it went wrong. Nothing was incorrect. That's the problem. Nothing was strong enough to survive being questioned. And that realization stays with you longer than it should. The lesson doesn't really end so much as it dissolves. One moment people are speaking, questioning, circling ideas like they matter, and the next everyone is standing, moving, leaving, as if something important just happened without anyone agreeing on what it was. Socrates continues talking with your teacher, completely uninterested in whether the rest of you understood anything, which feels very consistent with everything you've just experienced. You stand because everyone else does. Not because you feel finished, not because you feel confident, but because staying seated would make you visible. And after being questioned like that, visibility has lost all its appeal. Outside, the city feels louder than before, even though it hasn't actually changed. It's just that inside was controlled, measured, almost surgical in the way people spoke, and now you're back in something that doesn't pretend to be organized. The arguments are still happening, just with less energy and more stubbornness. You pass the same man insisting his food is fresh, and at this point it feels less like a sales pitch and more like a personal belief he refuses to abandon. You walk through it, replaying what just happened, not the words exactly, but the feeling of them. That moment where you realized you weren't wrong, just not strong enough to defend what you said. It lingers longer than it should, like a conversation that ended without actually ending. A group of boys stands nearby, talking loudly, laughing at something that clearly improves every time it's retold. One of them glances at you, leans slightly toward the others, and says something just quiet enough that you don't hear it. The reaction, however, is very clear. A short laugh, controlled, deliberate, shared. You keep walking because stopping would mean choosing between responding or pretending you didn't hear it, and neither option improves your situation. For a moment, the street opens up and no one is looking at you, correcting you, or waiting for you to speak. It feels like relief, but a strange kind, the kind that makes you aware of how often you're being watched the rest of the time. At the same hour, in a place that doesn't have the luxury of reflection, the day hasn't shifted at all. It has simply continued. The workshop is hotter now, not because the fire changed, but because everything else has had time to absorb it. The air feels used, like it has already passed through too many lungs and decided not to improve the experience for the next person. The forge burns steadily, indifferent to how long you've been standing there, and the sound of metal being struck continues in uneven rhythms, each person slightly out of sync with the others. The earlier accident hasn't been forgotten, even if no one mentions it. The man who caused it is still there, moving back and forth with a different kind of focus now. Carrying instead of shaping, doing the kind of work that doesn't allow for mistakes because it doesn't allow for decisions. No one looks at him directly, which somehow makes it more obvious that everyone is aware of him. You return to your place, and the hammer feels different in your hand. Not heavier in a physical sense, but heavier in what it represents. Earlier, it was just a tool. Now it feels like something that can quietly expose you if you're not careful. You start working again, but the intention has changed. You're no longer trying to keep up or prove that you can do it. You're trying not to become the next person everyone silently adjusts around. That difference is small, but it sharpens your focus in a way the morning never did. Your movements are more deliberate now. You don't rush the strikes, but you don't hesitate either, because you've already seen what hesitation looks like when it turns into failure. Around you, the conversations have lost their edge. Fewer jokes, fewer distractions. People are tired, and tired people become efficient in ways that are not comforting to watch. Someone nearby mutters something about finishing before sunset, and another responds that the metal doesn't care about the sun. It's not even a joke, just a statement, and the fact that no one reacts to it makes it land harder than anything louder would. By now, the day doesn't feel like something you're moving through. It feels like something that's sticking to you. Out on the street, the air has changed again. Not cooler, not cleaner, just used. Like it has already passed through too many mouths, too many arguments, too many lungs that had no choice but to accept it. You breathe it in anyway, because refusing is not an option anyone has offered you. The ground under your feet is a mixture of dust, mud, and things no one wants to name. Water doesn't stay clean here. It sits, it collects, it becomes something else entirely, something that reflects the light just enough to look harmless until you get close enough to understand your mistake. You step around it, carefully, because stepping in it means carrying it with you for the rest of the day. A man passes you, close enough that you can smell him before you fully register his presence. It's not one smell, it's layers. Sweat that has dried and returned, smoke that has settled into fabric, oil, dust, something sharp underneath it all. You realize quickly that this isn't unusual. This is what people smell like here. Clean is not a standard, it's a memory. And the strange part is how quickly your mind accepts it. This morning you noticed everything, every smell, every sound, every discomfort. Now it blends together, like your brain has decided that if it paid attention to all of it, you wouldn't be able to function at all, which is probably true. Somewhere nearby, two men are arguing again, but it's slower now, less explosive. They're not trying to win anymore. They're trying not to lose, which is a completely different kind of effort. One of them repeats the same point for what feels like the fourth time, and no one stops him, not because they agree, but because arguing back would require energy no one has left. You keep walking, not because you have somewhere important to be, because standing still here turns you into part of the scene and you're not ready for that. And then, the world changes again. Not gradually, immediately. The air thickens, the smell sharpens, the heat returns, but this time it doesn't press down from above. It wraps around you like stepping into something alive that doesn't plan on letting you go. You're back inside. The workshop doesn't feel like a place anymore. It feels like a condition. Something you enter and immediately become part of, whether you want to or not. The forge burns with the same steady intensity, but now it feels closer, more aggressive, like the space between you and it has disappeared without asking permission. The metal glows, the tools wait, and the sound, constant, uneven, relentless, fills every gap where silence might have existed. And the smell. This is where it settles. Not just sweat, not just smoke, everything. Hot metal has a smell, sharp and dry. Burnt material adds something bitter to it. The air carries it all, presses it into your clothes, your skin, your breath. After a while, you stop noticing where one smell ends and another begins, like they've agreed to merge into something permanent. You wonder, briefly, if you smell like this too. Then you realize that asking the question already answers it. You return to your place. The hammer is still there, always there. You pick it up again, and your hands no longer react the way they did earlier. The pain is still there, but it's changed shape. It's no longer sharp and surprising. It's constant, predictable, like something that has decided to stay and doesn't need to introduce itself anymore. You start working. And now, the rhythm feels less like something you're trying to achieve and more like something you're trying not to lose. Across the room, the man from earlier is still carrying materials. Back and forth, back and forth. It's not heavy work in the same way. It's worse. Because shaping metal requires skill. This requires obedience. No one tells him anything. No one needs to. His new role speaks for itself. You watch him for a second longer than you should. Not out of sympathy, out of recognition. Because the difference between where he is and where you are is thinner than it looked this morning. You return your focus to the metal in front of you. Strike. Clean. Again. Still clean. For a few moments, everything aligns. The sound is sharp, controlled, correct. Your movements are deliberate, measured, almost precise enough to feel like control. And then you realize something uncomfortable. This is what doing well feels like here. Not pride, not satisfaction. Just the absence of correction. No one looks at you. No one speaks to you. No one adjusts your hands. You exist in the space without being noticed. And somehow, that feels like success. The light begins to change, but not in a comforting way. It softens, yes, stretches across the city in warmer tones, turning stone walls, gold and long shadows into something almost beautiful. But the feeling doesn't follow the light. The exhaustion stays exactly where it is, sitting in your shoulders, your hands, your back, like a weight that refuses to move even when the day technically should. The city doesn't quiet down, it just shifts tone. If your life is the poorer one, the work doesn't end with a clear signal. No one announces that you've done enough. Instead, it fades out slowly, like a fire losing strength, one person stopping, then another, until the noise of the workshop becomes less aggressive, less constant, but never fully gone. You set the hammer down, and for a moment, your hand doesn't open properly, like it has forgotten how to let go. When it finally does, the absence of weight feels strange, almost suspicious, like something is missing rather than finished. Your body is heavier now than when you started. Not just tired, worn, like something that has been used all day and is expected to be used again tomorrow without question. You step outside. The air is cooler, but not cleaner. The smells of the day follow you out, clinging to your skin and your clothes, making it impossible to tell where the workshop ends and you begin. You walk home, or something that qualifies as home. The streets are still active, but differently now. People move slower, voices lower, arguments less explosive, but somehow more bitter, like they've had time to settle into something personal. You pass the same vendor from earlier, still there, still insisting. At this point, you start to wonder if he sleeps or if this argument is simply his life. When you arrive, the space is smaller than you remember, or maybe you're just more aware of it now. The air inside hasn't moved much. It holds everything: heat, smell, the presence of people who have also had their own version of this day. Your mother is still working. Of course she is. The day didn't end for her either. It just changed shape. Food is prepared, if you can call it that. Bread again. A little more this time? Maybe. Or maybe you're just hoping. You sit. Your father is already there. Silence. Not uncomfortable, not peaceful, just expected. You eat. Slower now. Not because you want to enjoy it, because your body is too tired to rush. No one asks how your day was, because they already know. And even if they didn't, it wouldn't change anything. At some point, your mother looks at you. Not long, just enough. You can't tell if she's checking on you or measuring how much of you is still left for tomorrow. You finish eating, still not full. You never are. If your life belongs to the wealthy, the end of the day feels different, but it isn't lighter. It's just quieter. You leave the learning space and return through halls that hold less noise and more expectation. The air is cleaner, the movement controlled, and for a moment it almost feels like the day is over. It isn't. It's just changing into something else. You are brought to eat again. This time, more structured, more deliberate. Bread again, because everyone eats bread, but softer, better. More food than before, enough to satisfy you, not enough to make you forget where you are. You sit, others are present. Older voices, controlled conversations, discussions that move between topics you partially understand and topics you recognize only by tone. Politics, family names, reputation. Things that matter here. You listen, not because you're included, because you're expected to absorb. Someone asks you something, not difficult, not easy either. You answer, carefully. There's a pause, a small nod. The conversation moves on. You didn't impress anyone, but you didn't embarrass yourself. And somehow that feels like success. You take another bite, and for a moment you actually taste it. Then the conversation sharpens again. And you remember, this doesn't end tonight. This continues tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after that. Night arrives the way everything else has today, not gently, not as relief, just differently. The light disappears, but the day doesn't feel finished. It lingers, stuck to you, like dust that refuses to come off no matter how much you ignore it. The city quiets, but not completely. There are still voices, still footsteps, still arguments that have decided they are important enough to continue into the dark. Sleep is not something that welcomes you here. It's something you fall into. If your life is the poorer one, you lie down on something that barely deserves the word bed. It's not built for comfort. It's built for ending the day. The space is still warm. The air hasn't moved. Everything that happened today, the heat, the sweat, the work, the smell, it's all still here, just waiting for you to stop moving so it can settle properly. Your body feels like it has been borrowed and returned damaged. Your arms ache in a slow, constant way. Your hands pulse with every small movement, and your back feels like it has decided to remember everything you did, in detail, just in case you forgot. You close your eyes. And the strange part is, your mind doesn't stop. It replays things. The hammer, the mistake, the look. That moment when someone else got pulled out of their work and pushed into something smaller, something quieter, something everyone understood without being told. And the thought comes back again, clear, uninvited. That could have been you. Outside, you hear something move. A rat. Of course. You don't react. At this point, reacting would mean you still expect something different. You shift slightly, The surface under you doesn't improve. Sleep comes slowly, not peacefully, just eventually. And the worst part, before you fully fall asleep, you already know what tomorrow feels like. If your life belongs to the wealthy, night looks calmer here, quieter, more controlled. You lie down on something that actually supports you, which feels like a victory, until you realize your mind is still working exactly as hard as it was earlier. The air is cleaner, cooler, and yet you're not resting. Because your body isn't the problem. Your thoughts are. You stare into the dark, replaying the conversation. Not the whole thing, just the parts that matter. The question, the pause, the moment you realized you didn't know what to say next. You go over it again, adjusting your answer, improving it, making it sharper, stronger, more certain. It works in your head, which is exactly where it doesn't matter. Somewhere in the house, voices are still talking. Lower now, controlled. Decisions, plans, things you're not part of yet. You turn slightly. The bed is comfortable. Your mind isn't. And slowly something settles in. Not fear, not failure. Expectation. Because tomorrow, you won't just be asked again. You'll be expected to be better. And here, better is not optional. Sleep comes. Eventually. But it doesn't feel like an escape. It feels like a pause. There is no real teenage life here. No phase. No transition. You are not slowly becoming anything. You are pushed into it. Like metal into fire. Like words into argument. Like a day that starts before you're ready and ends without asking if you've had enough. If your life is the poorer one, you learn quickly that survival is quiet, repetitive, and unforgiving. You don't get space to think about who you are. You learn what you can do, how long you can do it, and how to avoid being the one people look at when something goes wrong. If your life belongs to the wealthy, you learn something different, but not easier. You learn how to speak, how to think, how to stand in a room without showing uncertainty, even when it's the only thing you feel. You are shaped not by work, but by expectation, and expectation has a way of following you even when everything else is quiet. And in both lives, you are watched. Not always directly, not always openly, but constantly. Judged not by what you feel, but by what you show. And tomorrow? Tomorrow doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply arrives, just like today did. So, that was your day. Not a story, not an adventure, just a normal day. A day where the morning doesn't ask if you're ready, the afternoon doesn't forgive your mistakes, and the night doesn't promise anything better. And yet, this is life here. So now, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you, you can finally do something they couldn't. Rest. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let your mind slow down. You're not being watched. You're not being tested. No one is waiting for you to answer correctly. Just for a moment. Nothing is expected from you. So close your eyes. Or don't. Stay here if you want. And listen, the fire is still there. Not loud, not demanding, just steady. A soft crackle in the background, like something that doesn't need your attention, but stays with you anyway. Let it sit there. Let it carry the rest of the night. And when you're ready, you can leave it behind. But for now, just stay. Good night.